Hello, everyone.
Hi there. So last time we wanted to record about femininity, but the topic turned out to be very deep, so we decided to break it all down into separate videos. And what we feel is necessary to start with is the topic of separation. So now, Rebecca, explain to us what separation is in very simple terms, like if you were explaining it to someone who's never heard of it before.
Separation is when you have a mostly happy state of mind inside. Of course, there are different ups and downs, but mostly a state of happiness, lightness, and drive. When you have a relationship, a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. You have a relationship. It's not necessarily marriage, meaning you have a great relationship. When you have your activity, it's your company perhaps, any activity, the one that brings you both pleasure and income. If you're in this picture, so to speak, then yes, that is separation.
So, roughly speaking, when your life is a success, you're satisfied with everything and fulfilled, then that's separation. Okay, let me ask this then. What if you're not separated?
Not separated is when you still have some kind of relationship, perhaps, but you don't like it. You have a lot of complaints about your partner, or you don't have a relationship at all, basically, because you're disillusioned. When you have financial problems with not being able to find that specific job, perhaps, or understanding what I want to do in this life at all, like the general understanding of what I want to do in this life, and like periodic relapses into depression, bad moods. Well, that's all there is when a person is not separated.
Okay, tell me, should separation only happen from parents or from something else too?
Actually, we always separate from mom, but we don't separate from dad. Dad is that kind of energy, it's the energy of creativity. We separate specifically from mom because she is the person who passes on, let's say, a certain layer of programs. And even if a grandmother or an aunt raised you, I don't know, whoever, the situations can be different. In any case, you separate from mom because someone gave birth to you biologically.
Okay, look, tell me then how, if a person, let's not do it that way. I'll even start with how a person can understand that they're not separated. Well, roughly speaking, every one of us has problems in life. I don't really know any super happy people who have no problems,
Uh huh.
and they arise one way or another. Does this mean that a person is not separated? Or can a person be separated but still have some ups and downs in life?
Of course, there are ups and downs in life, that's inevitable. But what's the difference? The difference is that you can get stuck. For example, the swing tilts to one side and that's it, you're stuck. And you don't know how to turn it around and reach the middle. And if you're stuck there, for instance, on some resentment or something else, and you spend not just a day, but months or years, then it's clear that there is no separation.
Okay. And if you've come to realize that you're actually not separated, where do you start from, basically?
Basically, you can just start mechanically doing the separation practice and see what changes in your life. So, basically, what? First, probably just evaluate your reality. What reality am I in right now? And how much do I like or dislike this reality? And do I want to change anything in this reality? If the answer is yes, I want to grow, then just mechanically start with the separation practice and move in the direction of where you want to go.
Okay. And what does the separation practice itself look like?
The separation practice. Personally, I've done it differently with various specialists. I'll say there's also a practice where, for example, you're tied up and with a thread, a thread, with scissors, they cut it off you as if you're emerging. There's a practice where you're like reborn, coming out of the uterine tub you relive the whole birth process. There are actually a lot of practices, but most of all, yes, I like the practice given by Alexander Palienko, where you imagine your mother happy, 100% fulfilled. And with gratitude, you return her energy to her, take your energy back, give thanks, and sort of disidentify. I like this practice best because it's very positive. There are no unnecessary tears or extra emotions. And it's like, win win. It's great for her and it's great for you.
Cool. Okay. As a person who is more practical and likes more down to earth things, Well, practice is great, of course, but I just think you do the practice, it helps you emotionally. But there are still actions you must take in the real world. So, for example, if you live with your parents, you're probably not separated yet. If you take money from them, I mean, if your parents help you financially, you're already automatically dependent on them. You can be dependent on their emotional state, so their opinion affects you. Let's move a bit towards more practical things, like when you're actually interacting. And is it possible, besides doing the practice, to also do something in real life? For example, somehow setting boundaries with parents, cutting them off in a way. I don't know, saying, that's it, I'm not taking money from you anymore. Moving into my own apartment, moving to another city, starting to live my own life. But I specifically want some practical advice.
Okay, I understand. Yes, I probably tend to drift off a bit. So, regarding practical advice, if you're 21 plus and still living with your parents, the first thing I'd recommend is to try your hardest to just move out. You'll immediately say, well, I have no money and all that. In reality, those are all just excuses. When there's a strong desire, the opportunities just present themselves. And here, separation in general, well, it starts when you finally begin to feel where your boundaries end. But as long as you live with your parents, you're always in the position of a child. You will always be a little kid to your parents. And while you're still a kid, so to speak, well, what kind of self fulfillment can we talk about? No, there's this one thing. If there was a lot of trauma before 21, then this kid will puff up. I don't know, act tough, but will do everything to prove to their parents that they are an individual. There are, at least in our country, many men who have grown up, but they do everything just for their mom, to please her, to surprise her, to make her happy. And they're still playing out this relationship, mommy and sonny, where the mom is like, oh, you're my good boy, because she still sees him as little. And he's so happy that his mom is so happy. And they play this game and they're good at it because, in fact, the man at that moment isn't getting energy from his woman to fulfill himself. He's taking her energy and fulfilling himself through it. So, of course, the mom is happy. Why do women live longer? That was my thought. When I watched all this from the outside, I was like, well, now I know why women live longer. Because, in fact, those who have sons, they continue to play this game. And since there's this exchange of energies, yes, they live because he's alive and he's so, so important, with a little belly and cheeks like an important boss. And there's all this cooing from the mommy. This is the scenario that happens most often. Or conversely, from a position where the mother was very cruel and the son tries to prove that, you shouldn't have treated me that way. There are so many distorted, traumatized stories. But all of this, like, none of it is separation. Because here, they try to prove it from this position, from that position, someone to save, someone to prove, someone just to be loved, and blah, blah, blah. But the fact remains, if you're 21, then you pack your bags and do everything you can to move far away from your mother. Because only by moving far away from her will you finally understand where your boundaries end. Because as long as you're near her, it's impossible to find your own boundaries. It's just impossible. It's very hard. Maybe at most it'll be like, please close the door or knock when you come into my room. But man, that's just the teenage phase, okay?
Right? But does it help if, say, a person moves out? But something tells me that it still doesn't guarantee that you'll separate. It's like a necessary step, but not at all sufficient.
Not at all sufficient, I agree.
You just said that many men become successful, but still remain like tied to their mothers. And that raises the question, does everyone even need separation?
It's a choice.
So you have to consciously ask yourself that. Only if something, how do you say, clicks inside?
I was actually planning to bring this topic up separately, but okay, I'll say it.
Go ahead.
Over all these years, I've developed a certain theory. I've seen a huge number of successful men. I've seen a huge number of mothers bragging about their successful sons. I've seen a huge number of wives of these successful men. But they are also miserable. They're miserable, but they pretend to be happy. And they play along with it. It turns into this kind of threesome.
Mm-hmm.
also from the history of psychology. And in this triangle, everyone agrees to play along because everyone gets financial benefits.
Uh-huh.
But when the wife honestly says, I'm truly miserable, and she begins, as people sometimes say, going through the process of awakening, like that trendy word, awakening.
Yes.
At least that's what I call it. She'll wake up to being honest with herself. When she wakes up to being honest with herself and admits that she's miserable, that's when this triangle will start to break apart. And the more honest and deeper she goes, the faster this whole picture will change. But this break, it's going to be very, very painful. Because if separation hasn't happened, well, by 21, for men, it's usually by 18 years old. And it kind of happens at, I don't know, 30 or 40. It'll be very painful. Just imagine that it's like it's grown into each other and you're just like rawly
tearing it off.
It's very painful.
Okay, but will separation always be painful? I mean, you just mentioned that if it's by 21 for women and 18 for men, then basically I take it can go smoothly. And then like how does it increase the painfulness with every year?
Yes.
But can you go through it or somehow reduce this level of pain that you'll have to go through, or will you still have to go through the pain?
You'll still have to go through the pain. I don't know. Personally, I experienced pain, and I know that, well, I know many people who just like me went through this process, and I can say that distance helps more or less. That's true. Because anyway, when, for example, everything around you is new, whether you like it or not, you need to adapt to a new space, and you automatically switch as much as possible to what's happening now. And what used to be, it already starts to slowly fade away.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Distance helps. I can give an example from my own life that when I moved into my own home, I realized there was silence there. And I don't have this noise from my parents when they say, you need this, you need that, look at this, look at that. You finally find yourself one on one with your own thoughts and you start to feel your desires and needs more clearly, right? Because of that, like distance can do this. Okay, look, another thing, I think it's not easy, for example, to set boundaries between yourself and your parents, especially if there weren't any before. I mean, parents are used to calling you, telling you what to do. What about in this case? Is it better to cut it off abruptly, or are there some transitional ways to smooth it over? Or does it all depend on the specific situation?
I think it depends on the situation and directly on the parents and the children, depending on what kind of relationship they had before. For example, regarding this whole story, on the one hand, I'm probably glad that I didn't have such a very affectionate mother in my childhood. But on the other hand, it's like I'm not glad either. I mean, it's unclear because, like, however many clients I've had, everyone tells their own stories. And you realize that in any case, in every story, there's a moment that's sort of not ideal. Ultimately, you come to realize that something will always be a bit off. And yet, the goal is likely to take that responsibility onto yourself because ideal parents, I've met people like that. Clients have told me stories saying, well, and as I listen, I think, man, those are perfect parents, yet the person still finds something to complain about. And then there were stories that seemed just horrific. I mean, really, how did that person even manage to stay human? And yet they just, keep on living. And I realized that with this whole parental thing, you can spend forever digging into it, blowing it up, but still, once that painful moment passes, and you do have to experience the pain, you'll reach a sense of simple gratitude deep inside, but you have to live through it in the moment.
All right. Tell me, can the process of separation actually end with you cutting off all contact with your parents? Is that a possible outcome?
Yes, that does happen.
I mean, yeah, it could all end with the two of you simply not speaking anymore. And the question is,
are you ready
for
this? That's a massive fear for any child. Beyond the fear of a parent dying, which you have to process, the second major fear is that they'll be hurt and you'll stop talking. Imagine, it's all just so, You peel back one layer, then suddenly there's another underneath. You peel that back and there's more. It's just like that. And it's all rooted in fear. You just face that fear and say, aha, fine, I accept it. I won't talk to them. I'll never see them again in my life. I accept this. And like any fear, it came from somewhere inside you. Just as it appeared, it can also vanish. Of course, it happens, and there are plenty of stories where people haven't spoken for 20 to 30 years and so on. But I think that's precisely because things were either the enmeshment was too intense or the trauma was so deep that it drove people apart for all those years. That also happens. But I still believe in reaching a point where you see each other as soul to soul. Not as I'm the child and you're the mother, but as soul to soul. And then you won't have those painful dynamics or feelings anymore. In Carlos Castaneda's work, I don't know, I was absolutely enthralled when I read his books, and it explains very well why it's so important to disidentify and stop saying, this is my mom, this is, I don't know, my brother, this is my husband, this is my child, to stop doing that.
Okay, explain it to me, because honestly, I haven't read Carlos Castaneda, so I'm interested too.
Because as long as you're clinging to something like this, you're not letting yourself grow and you're not letting that person grow. Essentially, what are you doing? You are consuming each other. And when there's consumption, there's no growth. And all these relationship showdowns, these very intense family stories happen only because everyone is clinging to each other like this and no one is moving. And where there's no movement, there's stagnation. There must always be movement. And in order to move, your arms and legs must be free. You shouldn't be clinging to someone. My husband, my child, like mine, mine, mine. Us, it's not mine. In this world, nothing is yours, nothing. You're just a soul, and this is a soul. And to feel this gratitude specifically, that I'm grateful that you chose to take on the role of a mother and gave me this life. I'm grateful to you for that. And that's it. And then there's no manipulation. There are no these games. But I said, but he said, but they texted me, but they didn't call me, this and that. And a whole lot of other things.
It's good, by the way, that you brought up the topic that parents often manipulate with guilt.